everyone, welcome to Viz Review for week 40. Hi Charlie.
Hi Eva, how are you this week?
I can't believe it's week 40 already. It's
I know,
time's flying. And it's week of Tableau conference.
I know. Yeah, I've been doing my best to try and stay on top of it, but the difference is that when you're physically at a conference, you're away from Outlook and Teams hassling you all the time. So it's been a nightmare. I've given up. I'll just watch stuff later tonight.
Yeah, I've watched a few things, kind of like having breakfast, sitting down, watching something, or listening to things at least in the background. But it's been a struggle, and I only managed to catch, I think, a couple of sessions so far.
Yeah, there's good stuff. There's some really, really good content, and I've seen a couple of things by people that aren't as prominent, I guess, in the community, and they present stuff so well. It's been really, really good.
That's cool. So welcome to everyone who is joining us right now. And I know at least the streams or the channels that I've seen, they start in again in like 57 minutes. So this is good timing for Viz Review. And I do have a hard stop at 5 because I'm having a brain date, and I've never done those before. So I'll be curious to see how that works out. Let me bring up for everyone else our Twitter feed so we can go through the Vizes. And it's been a busy week for people doing Makeover Monday, which has been great.
It's been good. Yeah, people, I guess it sort of forces people to try and stick to an hour. So, excuse me, it's been interesting to see people react to the pressure, because we were under it ourselves when we did the session on Monday. And it definitely changes the challenge a bit, doesn't it? It cranks up the pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really liked when people told us how it felt to do it in 60 minutes. And a lot of people said, oh my God, I can't believe, how hard it is. And kudos to Andy for doing those live ones that he does in 60 minutes, more or less. So it's a good exercise to do every now and then, at least. So this week, actually, let me briefly remind everyone what we're looking at. Andy found this glorious visualization, and we're looking at the GDP for different metro areas. Well, in the case of the data, it's actually counties. And I think we both realized during the 60 minutes on Monday, it's much harder than it looks.
Yeah, I think I certainly wrestled with, actually, there's a lot of data. We got like 18 years of data or something like that for hundreds of counties across all the states. And there's elements, originally when I looked at the original Viz, I thought, okay, there's lots of bits I don't like about it, but it has drilled in and said, actually, I'm only going to worry about 2018, and I'm only going to worry about the top 10 locations. And having gone through the process, you can understand why they drilled in and focused on a subset of the data, because there's so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So shall we start with Aditya and see what he created? Okay. So let me make that a bit larger. There we go. The US cities with the highest economic output. At over 21 trillion, the US holds the title of the world's largest economy, accounting for almost a quarter of the global GDP total. I'd probably drop the word total, because if it's the global GDP, that's something we can assume anyway. So you can see the total US GDP growth. And then we've got this hex map. It's really spread out for my liking. I would prefer it a bit more condensed, because it's so spread out, it's hard to see the shape of the US. Like, I know it because I know what to expect, but I think if you just look at it and you don't really expect it to be a map, it might be a bit difficult. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that, because it just doesn't feel like the right shape. And I think I've said it before. Sometimes I feel like sometimes people set the dimensions of their dashboard based on like one element within the dashboard, and it almost feels like it's been made to fit that subtitle. So the width of that kind of seems to be determining the shape of everything. But if you squeezed the map a little bit tighter, it would look more American, because it looks a bit like someone sat on it.
Yeah.
But I mean, color-wise, I quite like the use of color. I'm trying to understand these sort of half-filled circles, because they kind of all look like they're filled 50%, and the colors used as kind of like the encoding factor. But because they're all like semicircles, it kind of implies that level of fullness, if that even makes sense, is part of the data, whereas it isn't. I think it's just, this is the design of the shape that teachers use. So for me, that it feels a bit strange. I would rather it was just a filled circle or something like that, so you could understand the color a little bit better.
Yeah, especially because I find the gray doesn't really stand out on the background, and with the blue, like the blue dominates for me. But if you want to call out I don't understand why the color legend wouldn't be the other way around, where the more intense color, this blue, is the one for the high numbers. Also, why is it a diverging color palette with two colors when there is no logical midpoint? It's, if you think of it in simple terms rather than trillions or billions, it's kind of like going from 0 to 10. Why would 0 to 5 or 1 to 5 be a different color than 6 to 10? They could all be the gradient of one color.
Yeah, and the section at the bottom, I'm assuming from looking at it that the values there are for 2018, but it's not clear unless my title's not coming through on public for me. But it's not clear that it's 2018, so I think that probably needs a subtitle.
Yeah.
And there's lots of attempts to shoehorn extra insight in by having viz and tooltips, but I think it's a bit saturated with information, partly because of the size of the viz and the level of information that's in there. So I think possibly it's a case where it could be just reeled in a little bit just to try and do less.
And if you look at so I just hovered over West Virginia, and it says the view is too large to show in the tooltip, because with these counties, in the tooltip, it's basically a picture. You don't get interactivity. You don't get a scroll bar. So you only see the top, 10 or 12. And like Charlie said, there's quite a lot in the tooltip. I would suggest, it's great to have these interactive visits, but if you, it says hover over the map, but that looks to me like the legend for the bar chart. Put that closer to the map, because otherwise, I wouldn't have hovered over it. I really think about kind of static images, which is really sad, but unless someone tells me very obviously, click on this because there's more information, why would I bother? So yeah, being careful with those visits in tooltip, because also this one is fine, but sometimes they take, it does take a second or so to load, which is not the smoothest user experience. So just considering, could you, there is plenty of space because it's all spread out. You could have those charts actually below the map constantly, and they could be popping up, they could be at a global level, and as I hover, it gets filtered to the state that I'm hovering over, and it just gives you a more comprehensive dashboard.
Yeah, no, that's a very good idea. If you take the charts out of the viz and tooltips and just have them stacked one on top of the other beside the map, it will just fit a lot better, I think.
Absolutely. And I do want to encourage people, because I see just a couple of comments so far. Please use the live chat to talk to each other, to write comments. For me, it's a bit hard to type at the same time because I'm running this on two different machines and I'm running it as Andy Kriegel. So, but feel free to, kind of write messages to each other. And I do want to say hello to everyone who is dialed in. Okay, shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah, so it's Rado next, and I think you.
That one's beautiful.
In Twitter.
I saw that and I noticed how it looks very Samo-ish.
Yeah. It's very, and it's a compliment, isn't it? Because Samo are the best white space users and general layout people. So it's fantastically clean, and I like it's just so impossibly simple, because it's removed all of the actual data apart from drawing the attention to this handful of states that are generating half the GDP. So it's, I don't know what more you can say. It's just incredibly clean and simple. Is it too stripped back? Possibly.
It is quite minimalist. So, I think the message is very clear. Half of the US, the GDP was generated in these states. So it's like, okay, if I trust the author, then that's probably good enough, because then I don't question it. But if I want to explore, like if I hover or click, nothing actually happens. So maybe it's a bit too minimalist because I can't see whether it's true or I can't interact. But I did just say, in all fairness, that I kind of treat them like pictures. So yeah, as a picture, it works for me, I have to say.
I think one simple addition to this would just be to have let's have a little bar chart, because I like bar charts, off to the side. It's off to the side in descending order by these blue states, and then just have one big grey bar for all the other states, just so we get a sense of, okay, and for these 7 states, actually which one generated the highest amount of GDP, and then it gives you an impression of actually what is the overall annual GDP of the states. And it doesn't clutter things up, but it gives you that extra insight without going overboard.
Yeah, agreed. But design-wise, really cool.
Very nice, yeah.
Yeah. And he's got that whole, what do you call it, neomorphism thing going on?
It's one of those faddy things, isn't it? I mean, it looks good.
It looks good because also I think because it's just once, like the whole thing looks like those wall-mounted pictures rather than having lots of beveled stuff in there. So I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Okay, next we have Hashmi Shah. I noticed that not only does Andy cause us tech issues, he also lights up the chat. And it's very noticeable that he's not there. It's so quiet. Don't be so shy, people. Feel free to talk. But I'm thinking maybe, I don't know if there's people doing things maybe TC related, but that's okay. So this one by Hashmi, what do you think?
Okay, so she has gone sort of some of the feedback we gave in the first one, your last suggestion about taking stuff out of the Vism tooltips and bunging it to the side. This sort of feels kind of like Hashmi's gone down that route of exposing everything in one view, and it just becomes more digestible because you're not having to do any work or hovering to understand stuff. So I like the fact that it's a 2x2 grid because it's nice and easy to see. I'm curious about, so the tree map says it's doing the average GDP for a region, which I'm not sure that I would use an average as a measure of GDP for loads of reasons. So, regionally, you might have huge numbers of counties and you might have one single county within the region that generates huge amounts of GDP, but it gets diluted when you average it over the number of counties that are in there. Or, on the opposite side, you might have one region where you've only got a handful of counties generating fairly consistent amount of GDP, and then it'll skew things. So I'm not sure average makes sense to me. On the right, you've got the state-wise GDP and the top counties in 2018, so that's fine. Good, it gives you some insight and it shows you what states the counties are part of, so that's cool. And then we've got the top 5 states through the years, just showing how everything's had that little bit of growth and that California's streaks ahead. So I think in isolation there's good bits here, but I that top left tree map I've got big questions about.
Yeah, I also think because the tree map sorts things by size, but here we have regions that actually go in a geographical order. So Far West, thankfully, is on the left, but Mid East is more like a Midwest kind of location. So maybe a bar chart where you either sort it in descending order, which is fine, or you sort it in geographical order, so that, or something like. I just think the US has such distinct regions that I almost expect things to be where they are geographically.
Yeah, and then color use is another risky area because it's all these shades of blue, but they're not consistent. So you've got California is the same color as LA, so okay, LA's in California, but
then Texas and New York have the same color.
Yeah, and so there's a few overlaps there. So you don't have to use color or diverging palettes. You could easily just have all these bars the same color.
Yeah.
So yeah, just be careful with colour.
Okay. So moving on to number 4 is Preet, and we have a bar chart. You love bar charts.
But and I specifically included this one because I think Preet is probably one of the people whose output has progressed so much in like probably 6 months. Just the quality has gone to kind of really, really, really high, because I think initially, if Preet was to look back at some earlier submissions, they could have been a little bit busy, but he's taken on loads of feedback and has made things really simple, and he's taken on elements of what other people in the community do and incorporated them. And I just think this is kind of as nice as it gets for me. So simple, minimal, labeled nicely. I can't really fault it.
I agree. The one thing I would change, and I don't know how this displays on your machine, but I get at least 3 different font styles. And this is probably because there was a special font used. I don't know if some of this is images, and then the viz itself, it updates to like a Times New Roman because the font maybe wasn't available on Tableau Public. So just being mindful of that. I personally, I'll admit, when I use my Mac to create a viz, I tend to always use Avenir, and it doesn't exist on Tableau Public, but I just like Avenir, and I only care about the picture. But if you create on a Windows machine, and you don't have Avenir installed, I tend to stick to the Tableau font because I know it's going to work and it's going to look consistent. And what I really like is to use Tableau Lite because it just looks a bit more modern, more fresh. But, just something to keep in mind. So this Preet is what it looks like when it's just displayed on my machine. I also don't seem to be able to click on any of the bars. I can only so this white frame is an image that covers the bars, and then they're not interactive, so I can't hover over them. Maybe that just needs to go back in the sort order. If it's transparent and has no fill and has just the outline, put it back in the order so that your viz is in the front. Okay. And then David Ingram. Okay, there's a lot going on here, so let's explore what we have. We've got a map, we've got 2 bar charts and a line chart. And my first hunch is to say let's tone down the color, because we have lots of red, orange and yellow, but then also every color in the rainbow in that line chart, and it just makes it look very busy. I think if you use the same viz, and actually, why don't we? Let's see if we can make this happen. If we just remove all that color busyness, I wonder how it would look and whether it would immediately become a bit simpler. So let me see if I can do a bit of a live demo. Oh, great to hear. George Pattinson always uses Tableau Lite as well. So maybe, Charlie, feel free to continue your critique, and I will bring this up in Tableau.
Yeah, I've managed to break it with one button press. So I don't know what it is with me and maps, but I always manage to break stuff. So like if I click the main map, the states by percentage of total GDP chart in the top right just shows that state, and then I can't deselect it. So it always fixes the top right chart to only having the selected state in. So I don't know if I've got some lag on public or if it's some issue with the way the actions have been set up, but it'd be interesting to see if it happens when you do it on the workbook.
Yeah, it's odd. So I just did, because the workbook is still loading, so I just clicked on the top right on these states, and everything updates except the other bar chart, because there I have to filter again from the filter, which doesn't make sense to me. Why not have that filter the counties as well? Okay, so I'm now in Tableau, and let me do some quick tidy up. I want to tidy up the formatting first and foremost, getting rid of all those pesky grid lines. It makes such a big difference already if you get rid of those. And and also the axis rulers, they always bother me. I prefer to just have a 0 line but no axis rulers, because they tend to, it's just another thing that's there. Now, Colors. Okay, so let's go to this chart and let's actually put the state on label instead of on color. And everything, it becomes blue automatically, but maybe let's just change it to gray for now, because once we have it to gray, we can always selectively add color. Let's do the same with the chart that is red for no apparent reason, at least not that I can tell. Oh, maybe, no, it just has red selected. But let's make all of that gray as well. And the bar chart in the top right corner also doesn't really need the color, because the length of the bars already tells me that, one is kind of more than the other. And the map, what shall we do about the map? Maybe we just pick a color palette that is a bit more simple. So we've got an orange one. Maybe a warm gray. But also, if I go back, I don't know why there's a black background, because it doesn't, I just think the map options, I don't like it. Map layers, always. Let's do a light background. And we need to not have the base or the land color, but we need the coastline. And we could have the state as labels, like proper labels, but then get rid of the state names in the background, because then you can control, the color. Maybe actually they're a bit long, so we could use the state abbreviation as the label. Okay. And the title will also give it a bit of a color makeover, and that can be a nice dark color. And what I recommend is, so there's a lot of like Tableau Book plus bold as a default. I get rid of that and I just make it Tableau semi-bold, because I find it's neater and it's bolder. Now in the map, I also want to get rid of my borders. And then, so we have an action, I think in the top right corner. Filter state, okay, so highlight map, filter UDG, oh geez. I'm just going to add a new one, because that's going to be faster. So states by percentage of total. Which one is that? See, it would be nice if I could tell which field is which. Actually, let me... So that one is called... What is it called? Okay, State 2018 GDP bar. State 18 GDP bar. Edit. And we also want to do... county, that one should also be. Okay, let's see if that works. So if I now click on the state, why does the bar still, why does that not update? But let me just add a new action and see what happens. Filter, so we want the GDP bar, and then the county should be filtered. Select. Okay. I never name my filters, by the way. There we go. Because now we can get rid of that. I think we're also, I'm just gonna do that. Get rid of that thing, and let's see. So now if I click on a state, it filters every single chart, which I find a bit easier, that I don't have to do another step of filtering. And of course you can add more color, make it a bit more interesting, but I just wanted to see how does it look when we strip it all back. And you'd need to adjust the filter to make sure that the lines come back fully. Okay, so there's still a bit of filtering work to do, but just as a bit of a suggestion of why stripping it back would make it simpler. Okay, let's get back to our list. We have Paul Albert next, and I'll let you take this one.
Okay, so this one looked quite standout because it's obviously quite a map-heavy week for us this week. So I was drawn to it because it wasn't a map, to be quite honest. So he's going along with the Pareto principle. So where the theory is that 20% of your contributors generate 80% of the revenue or 80% of the sales, whatever whatever things it is that you're comparing. And I quite like the analysis that Paul's done here, because he's effectively shown, if you look at a state level, actually 20% of the states are only generating about between 40 and 50% of the GDP. So at a state level, it breaks the Pareto principle because it isn't the 20-80 relationship. But when you actually go the level below state, so you start looking at the county and you hover over this chart, which I guess it's just a series of lines for each different year. When you hover over it, you see the distribution at a county level. You quite often see that actually it does conform to the principle. So like at the moment I'm at North Carolina, and it fits pretty well in with the principle. If you look at Texas, it's actually skewed slightly the other way. So fewer counties generate more than 80% of the share of the GDP. So I just like it because firstly, it's not a map, and secondly, because Paul's had this idea in his head. He's explored it at a state level, realised, okay, it doesn't quite conform there, but he's gone a step further and said, all right, well, I know there's a bit more granularity in my data. Does it work if I go further down? And it does. So I think it's quite nice. I think it's insightful. I think it's a case where Viz and tooltips do work, because it sort of reveals you this extra layer of insight that isn't there on the surface. So overall, it's good. I mean, he's written this section to the right, which is probably lifted from Wikipedia or something, about the origins of the principle. So I don't know if that's necessarily necessary, but it's if people aren't familiar with the principle, it gives them an idea of what it is. And overall, I think it's just a really nice Viz, which is executed quite well and presents the info in a different way.
And I know he did this during the 60 minutes. And I remember we actually presented this, and we already gave him some feedback to say, make those lines a bit thinner, because it looks a bit like a 3D line, but it's actually just lots and lots of lines stacked on top of each other. So maybe having a look at that again. But +1 to everything you said. And then we have Christoph. Now, is there a link? Yes.
Yeah, there is. Christoph's on the watching right now as well, so this is good. Hi, Christoph.
Excellent. Oh yes, he's watching from Poland.
So how has the GDP changed in your selected state? So that title's a bit complicated, isn't it? Having chained and changed, it's like a linguistic gymnastics.
And I don't know if you need chained in the title, because it literally says it in the subtitle as well. So I would get rid of that word just to make it easier to actually read that title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then, so it's quite nice. So we can look at what is this? The change since 2001, or we can get the year-on-year change. So the two different sort of table calcs that you can do. Pick out your state of interest, see it, and it's like, this is like kind of textbook parameter-driven line charts. So I like it. So just using size and color to reinforce your parameter choice. We've still got detail over all the detail in the tooltips. I'd probably make the tooltips a bit bigger because they're a little hard to see. And similarly, the axis, I don't know if I've zoomed out a bit. I might have zoomed out. Like the axis titles, so the axis labels look a little bit small, but actually when I've zoomed in, they don't. So ignore that. I'd still probably bump the tooltip text size a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I've zoomed it into 150 and I can read it comfortably. So making that a bit bigger is a good idea. And one suggestion that Andy actually made on Monday is for people to change District of Columbia to Washington, D.C., because that's what most people know it as. And just nitpicky little thing, but the y-axis I would change to have no decimal points, because it's just the percentage. And in the tooltip, it's fine to have the decimal points, but I think it doesn't really need it on the axis.
And there's one tiny little, this is just a little aesthetic suggestion that I quite like doing. So when you've got a parameter, you can obviously write a calculation that says if the state equals the parameter, then give me the state, and you can use that to add a bit more color and context to your tooltip. So at the moment, if I hover over the tooltips and I've got it set at Alaska or whatever it is, Alaska just comes up as black font, as do all of the other states. But you can just write simple little calcs based on the parameter, which you can then drop into the tooltip and color them, so you know that your selected parameterized state is going to come green, the same as the line. It's just a tiny little detail, but it can add a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Someone said my voice is fading out. I'm literally, like, if I get any closer, I'm going to be kissing the microphone. So I hope this is good enough, and people can hear me. Because I think, Charlie, you can hear me fine. It just seems to be something from Zoom into YouTube that kind of gets lost.
Yeah, we had trouble on Monday, didn't we? And
we did. Yeah. So the next one is Anna Viz, that's her Twitter handle, and she did her first Makeover Monday. I think she had also just joined Twitter on Monday because, she wasn't really following anyone yet and didn't have followers. So I think she only picked up Tableau last week. So here is her Viz. U.S. counties with the highest increase in economic output in a decade. So.
Okay, so she said, what's the percent change in the last 10 years, and given us the top 10. So it's a different take on things, which is interesting. But then you wonder, can it possibly be right that a county that's only had 9.6% increase in a decade could make the top 10? Instinctively, it doesn't feel like that could be possible.
Well, and also Andy mentioned this, there are multiple Cook counties and Orange counties, so you have to include the state, ideally in the name, but at least in the details, so that it's just a single county, not all of the Cook counties taken together. So that's maybe something to double check. And
yeah, so those are the things that stand out. So yeah, check the calcs, check the level of aggregation where you've got those duplicate counties. And then, if Anna's just picked up Tableau, there's a few like basic things that she'll learn to change in future. So just stuff like you don't need the great grid lines or the headers on the rows and columns. I don't know that the color needs to be applied in this way to the bars. And then there's just almost like the courtesy steps you take of citing a data source, put the fact that, put the author's name at the bottom, just so people recognize it's your work. But for a first effort in a first week of Tableau, I think there's a good platform for Anna to build on.
Absolutely. So well done for joining us, for taking the plunge, and we look forward to seeing lots more visits from you. And then we have Pretak, and I see a slope chart.
Yeah, and he said it was tough and challenging in the fastest 60 minutes of his life. So this is what Makeover Monday does to you.
Okay. So I like that he's focused on that change as well. And I think a slope chart is a really neat way to show that difference, because you just have a start and an end point and something stands out. So, okay, so we have a pre-selection of the far west. Let's take Great Lakes, because why not? And then the axis changes, the y-axis, because of course some counties... Oh, is this... Okay, so each line is just a state. Okay.
Yeah.
Would you fix the y-axis so that as I pick a different region, it's actually easier to compare how big, how significant their contribution is?
It's difficult because there's never one view where everything's aggregated up. So there's going to be some regions where their GDP is really relatively low compared to the top regions. So it's something you could consider, but I think you'd probably end up with a load of slopes really low down, looking a bit compressed, and then that might almost look a bit weird without the context of the overall all the regions, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And
so what you could potentially do is just change it, so rather than it acting as a filter, you could almost have a parameter driven selection instead, where it just use color to highlight your selected regions within the context of all of the regions, possibly.
Yeah, definitely. And a suggestion is that the table on the right side, I think, because the most the region with the most states in it is the southeast, because it's got a lot of states, but everything else doesn't have that many. And I think you could get away with actually labeling the end of the lines instead of having that table, and that way, because if I look at the table, I have no label, and at least the top one would be interesting for me to see, who's the top one. So maybe at least labeling the top line, so that I have okay, this is a state in that region, because currently that's, and then I don't know if you need the highlight filter, because you could do that through the table. You could do a hover action on the table to then highlight things, highlight the line in the slope chart.
Yeah, or you could have, instead of it having a table, just have it as bar charts sorted in descending order, because at the moment it's alphabetical.
Yeah, that's a good idea as well.
You almost expect them to line up with the slope chart, but they can't. So yeah, it's just, but like Pretak said himself, it was an hour and he was proud of what he did. So it's a good effort.
It absolutely is. And I think this review then gives him a few more ideas if he wants to make some more changes. So well done. And then we have Redona, and I think that this was also, we picked it up at the presentations on Monday. Okay, what do you think about this one? We've got a very big map. It takes up a quarter of the space.
Yeah, it just the balance. There's like areas where there's almost too much white space, and areas where maybe there isn't enough. So I think the layout just needs a little bit of consideration, and it's got this problem with Alaska being massive, and on a US map, it just looks a bit strange. And this is where the benefits of hex maps become quite useful, because you don't have this strange geographic chasm, even though it does exist, between mainland USA and Alaska. So I'd possibly choose a different type of map, and unless let me try and, because the map doesn't interact, or does it? Oh, it does. So you can choose a state on the map and it will filter everything else. So it's kind of a useful element to the overall dashboard, but it feels like it's quite far away from everything else. So I'm only looking at it on a small laptop screen, but my eye has to wander quite a long way from clicking a state to looking down at the different charts. So I think generally there's a need to shuffle the layout to get things a little bit closer to each other and feeling a bit more complete, because it feels quite separate. Yeah,
definitely. Okay. I always zoom out again so that the next viz is not going to just explode. So what do we have here? Tina. Let's see what Tina has created.
Okay, so we've got the same map challenge as before.
Yeah.
So when you look at hex maps and Tableau and Google, you can't fail to find good resource. There's loads now. I think it's the shapefile version is the easiest one to use now. I can't remember who has written about it, but it's probably 10 people. So recommended.
Absolutely, yeah. It's especially because, Alaska, because of its size, it just takes up so much space, and we're almost seeing the entire northern hemisphere here. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that isn't actually data or isn't actually a state we can click on. And Hawaii, because of how small it is, it gets a bit lost in that black ocean. Plus the bars also take up a huge amount of space, and they don't really need to.
Yeah, so the bar section is kind of separate to the map altogether. So if you hover over the map, you get the state level change in GDP, which is fine, but it's entirely separate. So those 10 counties at the bottom are just irrespective of the chart, the map. Here are the 10 counties with the highest total GDP in this whole date period, which is fine, but it almost feels like it could be a separate viz. So to Tina, I'd say, choose what you want to focus on. You either focus on this subset and maybe plot their trend over time, or you just focus on the overall picture and see if you can find a better map and a better way of summarizing those changes.
Or having the map filter to the top 10 within each state. You could do that exactly. As well. Now, also, it looks like this is the total GDP between 2001 and 2018, which to me doesn't make much sense, because typically we look at GDP at an annual level. So I would say filter it to a single year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And no questions so far on the chat. Then we have Ajinka, I think.
Oh yeah, so Ajinka was on the call. Was it Monday? Yeah. Was it Monday?
It was Monday morning. Yeah, it seems so long ago. It's been a busy week.
So this comes out all sorts of funny on my screen until I zoom in. So
same here. I think it's automatic sizing, but it's not actually filling up the whole space. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's gone very.
The map is covering up all sorts of things. I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm going to try and put it on a bigger screen and see if it behaves.
But it looks the same on Tableau Public. There's just weird stuff. There's a lot of white space. So make sure that your size, like your dashboard, is filled up. And if you don't fill it up, just reduce the size.
Yeah, it's doing some very weird things on my laptop, but I'll carry on regardless. So we've got map with just the state abbreviations, which is cool because it uses less space. And I think I'm slowly becoming more familiar with America, having done this project for so long now. So it's you get some idea of what all these abbreviations are. So you can hover over the states, see the trend in like an area chart, which is nice. And then we get the extra level of, so when you move over the map, you see the trend of the state as a whole and then the counties within it. But the bottom right bit is really hectic because some of these states have got so many counties. It's just like an overlapping massive county names. And when you get some states where there's huge differences between the most productive and least productive counties. So you just end up with this washed out load of light blue and a couple of dark patches. Everything just merges together. So I don't think that that use of color scale is effective. And I just think it's a level of geography that's too deep. It's just a bunch of grids. It doesn't work for me. Something that doesn't fit for me is we've got this interaction of top left, top right, bottom right. And then at the bottom left, you've got this shoehorned in thing, which is saying, well, ignore the fact that you filled all of that. Here's the top 10 in the states altogether. It just feels a bit out of place. So I think there's that need for a bit of continuity to the analysis, because you want everything to hang together consistently rather than have this like addendum stuck on the side. It just feels out of place.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so I think that's some good suggestions there. And next we have Sneha and another map. We have lots of maps.
We have a lot of maps this week. So this is one where Mapbox has been used for the first time, so it will look a little bit different to the other stuff.
Okay. So it says US states by economic output, year, top, bottom. Instead of just having that, I would always, when possible, make your filters, name them as an instruction. So select a year, select the top N states, or select the bottom N states, so that people know what they're meant to do. Because I'm like, okay, top 5, bottom 5. Okay, I'm done. What else? So what? But I think you need to tell people that they actually have to do something here to change the viz.
Yeah, and just little details like it's obviously they've all been plonked into one container that's taken up the whole width, but it just like in the top and bottom filters, it just looks like it's unnecessarily wide. So use padding or use blanks to squish it down and make it look a bit less thrown in, just to give it that little bit more finesse. I mean, I quite like the way that when you set the parameters to the bottom, the top and bottom, that it will show the value of that state. It's kind of it's a nice touch. It does make you wonder, but what about all the rest? So again, I almost want to see the context of, and I'm going to say bars again, but down on the right hand side, it might be useful to see all of the states and just to highlight these top 3 or top whatever and bottom 5 states within the context of all the other states, just so you get that overall view and things.
Yeah. And I find the map just far too busy because, I mean, you can change this in Mapbox, but I don't need any labeling for Canada. I don't need any labeling for the Caribbean, for Mexico. Like, all of that can go. I just want labels for the US. There's also GDP chain written in the middle of the map, which I don't need. And it just looks too busy with all those words and abbreviations. And the labels on the states, the names are quite large. I mean, I'm happy with large fonts, but then they don't fit into small states. So just something to consider how that's going to work.
Okay, so got Vadim next, and it's got a map.
Another map.
Is there? I don't think there's a link on this one.
There's no link, so it's also a very blurry picture.
Yeah, so what have we got? Big cities drive US GDP, which is kind of probably what you'd expect because the city probably expands around the productivity of the place. The top 10 counties make up 20% of the total country GDP, which is all good. LA's remained the biggest county since 2001, except 2006, which is all good. So it's a challenge when we haven't got a link. I'm trying to work out what this right-hand stack bar is doing. Okay, so it's just reinforcing that top bit, which says these top 10 counties are generally generating a fifth of the GDP throughout all of these years. So, I mean, it's nice. It's like, it's sort of touching on the very high level principle of the Pareto stuff and showing it as a chart. So I like that. It's an extra layer of analysis.
But it doesn't change much. So I find it almost like, it's the same for every year, because it really doesn't change much.
No, it doesn't. And then it's difficult again because we haven't got the interactive dashboard, but like the left-hand side, I assume that's county level. It's quite busy, and it doesn't really allow me to identify what those top 10 counties are. There's like, I don't know, dozens of stuff that appears, dozens of counties which appear dark. I can't tell what the top 10 are, so I'd almost expect it. I know the top 10 will have changed year by year, but that is based on 2018, so you'd have thought it would make sense to call out the top 10.
Yeah, and shouldn't they be then in dark blue rather than red?
Yeah, so yeah, just consistency across the dashboards needed.
Okay. Do we have anything else? Okay, we've got more maps. Okay.
We've got a really nice one, which is Daniel, and I know he's on YouTube now, so it'd be
let's jump to that one.
Good to look at it because we've talked about hex maps and how they get around some of these geographical quirks of America, and this just totally shows the value of that because Alaska's not miles away. And it just allows you to have a much neater, more compact viz. It's got nice rounded bars off the side to show.
You can see every state. You know, the little ones on the East Coast don't get completely jumbled up.
Yeah, and it's got really quite nice use of color to show the share of GDP that each of these states delivers. So you've got over 4%, 2 to 4, or less than 2%. So that's quite a nice, neat way of doing stuff. The rounded bars are fine. Again, they're like, you think in the where you need precision, they might have downsides, but because it's directly labeled, it gets round that need to be precise, so you possibly wouldn't have a business dashboard, but this is because it's got that like dollar bill in the background. It's positioned in a way which is a bit more relaxed than being like a formal business dashboard. So I just think everything together works. Font size is good. I just think it's all good.
Yeah, it's really well done.
So yeah, well done, Daniel.
Cool. Okay. And then we have Ton that line. Okay.
So this is another first for Makeover Monday.
Very good. Welcome to Makeover Monday.
Right, so 8 states produced more than half of the GDP in 2018. During that year, 11 counties produced more than $165 billion each, which is crazy, contributing to a fifth of the overall. So again, I like appreciate it when people look and don't necessarily just create a visualization. I think she's gone off and actually tried to get a sense of scale, and there's probably separate sheets hidden behind the scenes which backed up those numbers. And so the map is quite hectic because we've got a plot for every single county, and then obviously where you've got counties.
Yeah, I'm going to download this while you talk because I've got a bit of an idea. So keep going.
Because I think so we've got the circles for each county are sized and coloured, I guess, based on GDP. I'm not quite sure. It'd be interesting to see where the green comes into it. It's like it's got a custom colour scale. Oh no, okay, so so the blue, according to the title, is going to be the 11 counties with the highest GDP. The green is going to be the states, which are where you've got the 8 states with half the GDP in. So that's a bit of a complex thing to get your head round, because you've obviously got states that have got tiny counties which deliver very little GDP potentially, getting called out almost as prominently as the bigger counties that are generating more, if you know what I mean. So there's a bit of a conflict there. But I think the challenge with this is you've got massive circles for the most productive counties, and they're going to be overlapping hugely on the underlying counties.
Yes, and I was thinking that, so first suggestion I would make is to make the dashboard. Put your summary map in there, because then you have more control over the size. I'm just going to, because we're looking... okay, whatever. I'm just going to remove that container for now. But the title for me is just too small, because like it's a long sentence, and I wonder whether we change that. Whoops.
It's almost like it isn't the title. It's like it's almost like the subtitle.
Launching straight into it, isn't it?
Mm.
So if we said during 2018, 11 counties, 11 US counties produced a GDP of more than $160 billion each. Okay, now that one I would make, oh God, okay, nice and large, maybe something like 24, and I like a bit of capitalization to do that, and instead of making it bold, let's make it Tableau semi-bold. The color is really, like, I don't know if it stands out enough, but that one I probably would not make bold. The other stuff I'm not going to change now, just in the interest of time. Okay. Okay, and then maybe the source of data you can also put somewhere more towards the bottom. So you could put that into your caption, because it doesn't need to have, oh no, what am I doing? Because it takes up a bit of space at the top, and I think the hyperlinks just always look a bit messy in Tableau. because you can't just format the text to contain a hyperlink. So, okay, that's fine. And then again, let's get rid of just the border around it. But now we have, I mean, the title could be even bigger. I think it could be bigger. It could be like 30 points. And making the whole thing maybe a bit wider and a little bit taller, because then you've got a punchy title. I mean, I've kind of cut stuff off now from the bottom, but from the subtitle, but you could draw that out a bit, but having a really punchy title, because then also if it's larger, you see the colors more clearly. You could even work with highlighting those words, like the background, by hovering, having the text transparent, hovering just a blank that's filled in the color behind it, so that's almost like shading behind it, and that could look really punchy as well.
Cool.
Okay.
You need to wrap this up.
I need to wrap this up because I need to get myself some water before my brain date. I'm just going to bring back our faces for a minute just to say goodbye. So thanks, Charlie, once again. This has been fast and furious and fun.
Yeah, it's been a good week. So I think, what are we doing? Am I back to next week?
You're back next week, yes. I don't know what you're going to do yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Neither do I. It'll be days before we even know.
Cool. So well done, everyone. Favorites will probably come out on Friday. Enjoy a week of Data 20 Tableau fun. And looking forward to seeing what everyone is going to do with our feedback.
Okay, see you all later.
Okay, bye.